Number 5 on this list required no adult supervision, no safety equipment, and no permission beyond the words, "Be home before dark." It was considered normal. Today, it would generate a phone call to child services. Number 3 required a paper route, 6 weeks of saving, and a trip to the hardware store to buy something your father would teach you to use the same afternoon. That transaction, earning, saving, buying, learning, took place every summer in every town in America. It almost never happens anymore. And number 1 was not a toy. It was the closest thing a 10-year-old boy had to freedom before he was old enough to drive. 7 things. One summer. 1965. Subscribe now, because we're just getting started on the America worth remembering. Your mother did not know exactly where you were. That was the arrangement. You left after breakfast. You came back when the streetlights came on. In between, the entire neighborhood was yours. A boy of 10 in 1965 had a territory. A 4-block radius on foot, 8 blocks on a bicycle. You knew every shortcut, every dog to avoid, every yard where you could cut through. You knew which storm drain was deep enough to cool your feet in July, and which sidewalk cracked just right for a bike jump. That knowledge, physical, spatial, earned by hours of unsupervised exploration, built something in a child's nervous system that no app has ever replicated. Today, the average American child spends less than 7 minutes a day in unsupervised outdoor play. We did not make children safer by bringing them inside. We made them smaller. 25 cents a cup. A card table at the end of the driveway. A hand-lettered sign on cardboard. A pitcher your mother made you wash yourself when you were done. A boy running a lemonade stand in 1965 was learning what no classroom has ever been able to teach directly. How to talk to a stranger. How to make change. How to explain why your lemonade was worth a quarter when the guy down the street was charging a dime. How to stay in the heat all day for $1 and decide it was worth it. In 2011, a 6-year-old girl in Georgia had her lemonade stand shut down by county health inspectors for operating a food service business without a permit. The permit cost $50. She had made $7.50. We used to teach children that the world rewards initiative. Now we teach them it requires a permit. Not a fort someone else designed, not a kit from a store. A fort you built with wood from the scrap pile behind the garage. Nails you found in a coffee can on your father's workbench, and a hammer you were barely allowed to use. The fort was usually wrong. The floor didn't sit level. The roof leaked. The door was too small or too large, or both. None of that mattered. What mattered was that you built it. With your hands, with materials you found, with a problem in front of you and no instructions. That process, figuring out how to make something physical work without a tutorial, without a correct answer, with the constant feedback of a hammer hitting a thumb, produced a generation of men who could fix things. Today, 70% of American men under 40 report they cannot perform basic home repairs. We took the Ford away, and we wonder why nothing gets fixed.
After dinner, before dark, the sky going orange over the houses across the street. And then the first one, a single green pulse in the grass by the fence. You caught them in a jar with holes in the lid. You held the jar up to your face and watched them flash. You let them go before you went to bed because your mother told you they would die by morning if you didn't. You were not sure if that was true. You let them go anyway. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. One of these just put a specific evening in your mind. Not a year, an evening. A particular summer night you remember. Tell me in the comments where you were. Who else was there?
The air smelled like. I want to know. Fireflies are disappearing. Light pollution, pesticides, and suburban development have reduced their populations by more than 75% in the last 40 years. A child growing up in most American cities today has never seen one. They don't know what they're missing. That's the part that's hardest to explain.
Your alarm went off at 5. Nobody made you set it. You had 47 papers to deliver before school, and the bike was already loaded on the porch. The paper route in 1965 was not just a job. It was a system of obligations that a boy managed alone. You collected from your customers on Saturday morning. You paid the newspaper on Monday. Whatever was left was yours. You kept the books in a notebook your father gave you. The math was simple. The responsibility was not.
Boys who ran paper routes in the 1960s consistently report in surveys that it was the single most important job they ever had. Not because of the money, but because they were trusted to do it right, with no adult checking their work. The last daily newspaper home delivery route in most American cities was discontinued before 2010. We decided it was dangerous for children to be outside alone before dawn. We took away the alarm clock and the notebook and the Saturday morning collection, and the knowledge of what it felt like to be trusted completely. Not a pool with a lifeguard, a creek in the woods behind the subdivision. Water you couldn't see the bottom of, rocks you had to navigate to get in. Nobody taught you to swim in a creek. You figured it out. You learned where the current ran fast and where it slowed. You learned which rocks were slippery and which held. You learned that cold water on a hot day is the best thing your body has ever felt, and that the walk home, wet and muddy and exhausted, meant the day had been worth living. In 2024, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued guidelines recommending that children only swim in supervised facilities with trained lifeguards on duty. The creek is still there. Nobody goes anymore. Not transportation, freedom. The bicycle in 1965 was the first machine that made a boy faster than the world expected him to be. You went places nobody thought to look for you. You were gone for hours in a way that worried no one. You came back with dirt on your hands and stories you kept to yourself. The bicycle was the first thing you owned that extended the radius of your life. On foot, you were a child in a neighborhood. On a bike, you were a person in a town. Bicycle sales to children peaked in 1972. They have declined in every decade since. The average American child today spends less than 1 hour per week outdoors. In 1965, that number was closer to 6. We didn't take the bicycles away. We just gradually made the world feel too dangerous to ride them in. And a boy who never learns to extend his own radius grows up waiting for someone else to take him somewhere. We don't just remember the bicycles, we remember what we became on them. Which one of these was yours? The creek? The paper route? The fort in the backyard? Tell me in the comments. Name it. Place it. Give me one detail I'll recognize. I read every single one. Subscribe, because there is a lot more of this country left to remember. One more is right here. The rest are in the playlist below. See you in the next one.